You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where today we're taking a break from the Ashes and we're going to South Africa. They were taking on India at Centurion and they lost, India becoming the first team to win at Centurion from Asia. So well done to them. I'm Jack Hope, and I'm joined to talk about all of this by Ross Legg. How are you doing, Ross? Are you looking forward to a bonus cricket podcast? You're a little bit blurry for the people on the YouTube. Maybe you want to wipe your camera down, but yeah, introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's all right actually. I think it's quite nice to actually see some competitive Test cricket actually taking place, isn't it? Really.
I have to say that was sort of my overwhelming thought. So I didn't watch. I'll caveat a lot of this by saying I didn't watch the Boxing Day stuff because I was up to 5 a.m. watching England, and then I did the podcast, went back to bed, and didn't catch too much of the action on the 27th either. Well, I didn't catch any because it rained all day. But I saw a fair bit after that, and that was even though I think India were the better team and were on top of South Africa most of the game. With some pretty good individual performances thrown in to sort of seal the deal. South Africa didn't roll over. They actually played pretty decent Test cricket. They gave themselves an outside chance going into the final day. I think they can sort of pat themselves on the back for doing the fundamentals right. So yeah, I echo those thoughts with a few other thoughts. Before we get into detail, Ross, do you want to give the listeners and the viewers a couple of messages?
Yep. If you are following us on Spotify, then there's a new rating system on there. So go and give us 5 stars on Spotify. You should like and subscribe to this video in our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on Apple, leave us a review. If you write one, we will read it out. So funnier the better on those ones. And then on Twitter and Instagram, you can find us at the Cricket Pod.
Yeah, well, we haven't had an email for a while either, Ross.
No, we had it when we first started. We had some really strange stories. Remember the one around someone having a wee next to Darren Patterson?
Yeah, that was
Nottinghamshire.
That was odd. Yeah, that was strange. There's obviously Scotty G's Hayden story, which was gold, and part of the reason we're slightly obsessed with him. But yeah, the cricketpod at gmail.com if you'd like to email in a story about meeting a cricketer or an observation, or just want to contribute to the show, or you want to make us a very lucrative offer to buy the Cricket Podcast. We will listen to bids upwards of, was it £100,000 we discussed, Ross?
That's exactly what we're worth, isn't it? Yeah.
The cheap price of £100,000. Anyway, away from that and to the cricket, what happened for people who maybe were keeping their eye on the Ashes rather than what is it? Well, I don't even know what this series is called. South Africa v India.
Well, on the first day, India demonstrated how to open the batting, which England fans won't really understand what it is. Rahul and Agarwal put on 117 as their opening partnership before Ngidi turned on the style. India finished in a pretty strong position on day one, I think with over 270 runs on the board for only 3 wickets. But then second day was washed out, and then a collapse duly followed as India only managed to post 327 as their first innings score. KL Rahul, the ball eater, finishing on 123, demonstrating his prowess in this format of the game. Sadly for South Africa, they didn't really put up too much of a fight in the first bit. They were 32 for 4 inside 13 overs in their first innings. But Bavuma, who I think sometimes gets a pretty hard rap, if I'm perfectly honest, I quite like Bavuma, and de Kock put up some resistance, but the damage had kind of already been done. As much as they were going to battle, they were against Bumrah, Shami, Ashwin, the Lord was playing as well, and Siraj. Shami was the star of the show as he picked up 5, but South Africa were duly dismissed for 197. Then the question is always in these kind of games where you get a game washed out is how quickly can you hit some runs? And India were in that position where they weren't really too sure what the weather was going to do. There was no clouds over skies, but that was the same as the first day. So it was always a bit of a game to be played there. But there was plenty of starts for India's batters, but Marco Jansen and Rabada ensured they didn't get too far ahead, just the 300 runs ahead, so that they needed to chase on a tricky final day wicket. Dean Elgar was at his typical obdurate self, but the ask was always going to be too much. And South Africa collapsed from 130 for 5 to 191 all out. And that's India's 4th away Test win of the year, which when Test cricket is pretty much a home person's game, that's a pretty good going, I think, for India. Well played.
Yeah, so I'd like to start talking about this. We'll touch upon Kohli. I think we'll touch upon KL Rahul and stuff. But I'd like to start on the quality on show at the end of day 4. So this was yesterday afternoon. If you were in the UK, Dean Elgar, I called it Dean v Goliath on Twitter, trying to stand up to Siraj and Bumrah and Shami, bowling like these incredibly lively spells. It was just sort of, as you said right at the top, it was just so good to watch this really high quality battle as, mainly Elgar, but Van der Dussen for a while tried to get South Africa through to the end of the day to give them a hope of, chasing 220 with 8 wickets in hand. And then against that, they're like a gang of, I don't know. Hyenas, a gang of hyenas. Bumrah and Siraj, they picking the South Africans off. That ball that Van der Dussen got from Bumrah, which he left, good grief, that was a hell of a delivery, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you've not seen it, Bumrah has, but he's not given too many runs away, is he? And obviously, as you say, Rassie Van der Dussen's trying to weather the storm, and he's gone wide of the crease and come in, and the ball it's almost like an off cutter. It is turned, like, it is ridiculous. It comes back a good 3 or 4 feet, and you're just like, the umpire. The commentator goes, "Oh, I think Rassie Van der Dussen should have had that covered." I'm not sure he could have had it covered. It's hit the outside of the top of off stump. Yeah. It was almost a perfect delivery.
It's, there's the saying, isn't cricket? There's good leaves and bad leaves. I don't even think it was a bad leave. I know he's bold, but I'm thinking like, I don't really know what you're supposed to do with a ball of that quality. Bumrah, he pulls these spells out all the time. He's just such a magician when India needs somebody on because it started to flatten out a little bit, and Dean Elgar didn't look like he was going to get out. A little bit of pressure was just starting to be put on India. And then he comes in and just shuts the door in South Africa's face. Then crowns it. Last ball of the day. I think it was the 5th ball of the over, but obviously picks up the wicket of Maharaj, who'd been sent up the order to try and leave South Africa in as good a position as possible going into the final day. Yorks him, and it was you knew it was going to happen. You knew it was going to happen. That there's nothing. Maharaj knew it was going to happen, but there was nothing he could do about it. It was brilliant. Anyway, should we go back to earlier in the test? I think India's batting. We had a few questions on this, and we'll get to the questions in a bit. But we'll talk about that broadly. Fantastic work from KL Rahul, first of all, and we should acknowledge that. We talked about this a little bit at the end of one of our Ashes shows, so I don't want to retread old ground. But he's had a pretty good year, hasn't he? He's really cemented himself as, or he's starting to live up to that potential that he's shown. At points in his career, really looks like he's maybe the second name on the team sheet after Rohit Sharma when it comes to opening the batting for India, but maybe the tier above, like Shubman Gill, maybe even above Agarwal. I think. But apart from that, India looked a little bit shaky. The same middle order problems that we saw in England reared their head again a little bit here, I thought, Ross.
Yeah, I found it a little bit strange as well, because I can understand it from a World Test Championship point of view, where they continued with Pujara, continued with Rahane, and we kind of thought that this was the chance for India to start to shape what the next kind of couple of years looks like for this batting order. And Shreyas Iyer obviously hit a century on debut. And they've obviously they sent Vihari to South Africa to play against the A team. And he hit some, he's at back-to-back 50s, I think it was. And you're kind of questioning there, going, right, they've got a new coach in. They've obviously got a bit of a plan in terms of succession planning. And yet they've just reverted to type. They just kept it it was a very safe selection, I thought. And that safe selection actually, to me, is becoming increasingly unsafe for them.
Yeah, I mean, I see to some extent why they stuck with Rahane. He's got a pretty good average against pace bowling. He's one of India's better away from home batters. He's still within 12 months of that great innings he played at the MCG, isn't he? Or maybe just within 12 months. 12 months and a few days, maybe. So I can see why they keep him around. I do think, though, having seen watched a lot of the last 8, 9, 10, 11 India Test matches, that he looks less and less like the best option there. Now that Shreyas Iyer has come into the side and scored runs, I there's question marks about why isn't he playing? You talked about Vihari there. At some point, they're going to have to fit Rohit Sharma back in, and they might want to keep Mayank Agarwal in the side because he's scored runs. He's scored runs too. So look, these are all nice problems to have, but yeah, it seems like we're really, really in the end game. I thought Ajinkya Rahane would not make it to the end of the India v England series, and had they not played, or had they played that 5th test, he may not have done. But I'm really surprised to see him back here. I agree with that. Pujara, on the other hand, I think he had a pretty good tour of England.
It's a good year. I think it's 6 innings at the most half centuries of any player. But
it's a game to forget, isn't it?
But there's also a bit for India. Like we talk about sometimes around England's point of view is England's approach should be around expanding their opportunity to draw a test match. India are the second best team in the world, if not the best team in the world in test cricket. They should be the ones who are pushing to win the test matches. And I think there's people like Shreyas Iyer who they're ready to go, right? I
don't think they need to worry about it. See, I do get where you're going here, and you're making the Pujara takes too much time out of the game for a really good side. The overs he wastes. The flip side of that is that he offers a really good insurance policy. He puts overs into these overs have to be bowled by somebody. There might not be a lot of runs scored off them, but it's a lot of overs that Rabada and Ngidi and Marco Jansen have to send down to him. Perhaps not in this series, but in theory, perhaps not in this match, but in theory, that's what he's supposed to be doing. And I think that works. And then you fit around him, KL Rahul, Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli. The run should take care of themselves, or the pace of play should take care of itself with those boys in the lineup. I mean, the part of the problem or part of the sort of added pressure that's been put on these guys, I suppose, is really because Kohli isn't scoring. If Kohli's scoring runs, it's less obvious that Rahane isn't. He's a little bit less exposed. India are putting up good totals. They don't go from 270 for 3 to 350 all out or whatever. Whatever the approximate 327 all out. Sorry, I mean that's a real collapse, isn't it? 278 for 4. When the 4th wicket falls, 327 all out. They don't. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Kohli is part of the problem in this, and should we talk about him?
Yeah, no. Well, let's just finish off the Pujara point. I'm not saying. I just think they've got some really good alternatives that they've got, and sooner rather than later, they should be looking to play some of these alternatives. I think because otherwise they might get into a position where they've got a load of good talent, but with not much experience. And when the end of the road comes for Rahane, which doesn't look too far away, and the end of the road comes for Pujara, there is kind of question marks on it. But let's talk about Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli has been an unbelievably successful captain for India, but he has not hit a century in over two years now. That is an issue because he keeps getting starts as well, so he keeps looking good. Like looking at both of his dismissals here, in the first innings he was chasing one which was on like the 5th set of stumps outside off stump, and the guy is unbelievable at cover driving the ball, but he does not need to play at that delivery. It just seems like he's almost like throwing it away.
I feel like he's trying too hard. Maybe when things aren't working and you're that good and you are capable of dominating any bowling attack, probably your first instinct, or it seems like Kohli's first instinct, is to do what he always does: get aggressive, put pressure back on the other team. And I think the way that manifests itself in this match was poor shot selection. It wasn't he wasn't hitting a good ball for 4, was he? That's how you put a bowler under pressure. They bowl their best ball and he gets hit for 4. Do you remember when we had Tremlett on the podcast and he said the hardest bowler to the hardest batter to bowl to was Brian Lara, because he just arbitrarily whack the best ball you could bowl for 4. And he said you could bowl a good ball to Dravid, you could bowl a good ball to Tendulkar, and they wouldn't get out to it. They'd defend it and they'd pile on the runs, but you'd be able to think to yourself, I can send down 6 balls here and go for a run or go for a maiden and help the team. With Brian Lara, he said you just didn't have that option. Kohli is very much in the kind of Brian Lara mold as a player. He wants to go out and hit your best ball for 4 to show the world that he's Virat fucking Kohli and he's the best. When that isn't working, though, that thought process and all of the movements and stuff don't fire properly, do they? And you go and reach for a ball that's 5 sets of stumps away.
But to be fair to South Africa, that was their bowling plan, right? They looked like they actually had a plan in this, and that's why I was kind of impressed with them. Actually, against this batting lineup of which India have, I thought they bowled reasonably well. The pitch was interesting; it was a little bit flat in some cases. Then it came a bit alive after the rain. Ngidi had a brilliant Test match. He took 6 for in the first innings, including pretty much all the big name players.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And he's again one of those players who has got an interesting reputation. Like depending on who you talk to, he's either a really good player or he's kind of just a bang average seamer. But actually, I think
he might be one of those guys who's a bit better at Test cricket than T20 cricket. We see a lot of him. Well, we've seen a lot of him for like Chennai, and it's usually ends with him going into the stadium, out of the stadium rather. He goes into the stadium and the ball goes out of the stadium. But he did look excellent today. Or yesterday, sorry, this Test, yeah.
Yeah, I was just impressed with that. We talked about, I mentioned that Marco Jansen and Rabada, I mean, they come away with 4 fours each in the second innings. It's a good effort, regardless of people trying to hit out and stuff like that. So there are parts of this South Africa team that I think are strong, and I think they do have some good players. It's just around trying to get that consistency in that side. And obviously today, Quinton de Kock's come out and retired from Test cricket.
Well, that's the major news, isn't it? Or after the India win, I mean, he comes out and he says because he's expecting a child, he wants to effectively play less cricket, and Test cricket takes up too much time. So for family reasons, he is calling it a day. And that, I think, for South Africa is a colossal blow for that middle order, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. He always seems to hit runs against England, which is obviously how you judge anyone at Test cricket of how good England are against you.
Yeah.
But he's again a complex character, old de Kock, and obviously he was Test captain not too long ago, right? So Dean Elgar's obviously taken up with the reins. So maybe there is just that bit now where he's just like, you know what? Yeah,
they are a strange team in South Africa in that they feel almost there. In some ways, we're talking about their bowling attack. They didn't have Henrik Nortje, and they've got Dwan Olivier, who we're expecting to come into the team for the next Test. That's Rabada and Ngidi, Olivier, Nortje. That's a pretty tasty bowling lineup you've got. Then you've got Dean Elgar. Dean Elgar's a good player. Aidan Markram's a really good player. I like Van der Dussen. I mean, he's a little bit more limited than some of the better middle order players in world cricket, but he's not rubbish. He can play. Bavuma, like you, I was really impressed with him batting in this Test. Like some of his shots through the covers were excellent. And then around that though, they've got Keegan Peterson and Vian Mulder, and I'm not really sure they're quite up to the task. It's a very sort of up and down looking batting lineup.
I think when it comes to people like that, they just haven't had much exposure, right? In terms of like the different players that have been there. I just think there's just that opportunity for them to move forward, and they've got to play who they play, right? Maharaj, I don't think is gonna. I just don't rate Maharaj. I've always struggled to kind of be like, this guy is the perfect kind of spinner for them. But they've got people coming through the ranks. Like Marco Jansen is an exciting prospect. Right, he's quite young, left arm fast bowler. He should only get better. Vian Mulder is kind of 23, 24. So actually, him coming through is also a good thing. But as you say, their best bowler Nortje not in the side because he's injured.
Yeah.
So
and you take de Kock out, possibly the best wicketkeeper batter in Test cricket. or you used to be. Rishabh Pant might have a thing or two to say about that. But if you were going to build a world 11, it would be very close between those two.
Rizwan's probably there. Rizwan's probably there.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But I think I don't know. I'd probably have Punt and de Kock over Rizwan, but it's close. Rizwan was good, wasn't he, in New Zealand and stuff?
Better.
Yeah. Anyway, they're good. They're good players. They're elite. They're the three, let's say, that you definitely have down as candidates for your world 11, and South Africa probably the only player in their batting lineup who'd qualify for that, I think.
Yeah,
and he's walked off.
Yeah. I mean, we never know what goes on behind the scenes, especially in South Africa cricket. Like, it's a pretty interesting place. So maybe we'll get Dan back on the show, who's see if he gives an inside line. Dan Gallen, that is. Let's talk about India's bowling a little bit here, because their bowling lineup is in any condition, they are formidable. Like, it seems like regardless of where they are playing, they are set up very, very nicely. And they've got some resilience. They've got a couple of players after them who kind of come in. But if Bumrah, and I reckon I've said this exact sentence, but if Bumrah and Shami don't get you, Siraj kind of comes in. Then you've got Lord Thakur, who seems to pick up wickets when he doesn't even realise he's taking wickets. Like, the guy is just almost, it's like this lucky aura around him. He's like the four-leaf clover for India, where balls that get chopped on and all that kind of, just like, how does he do it all the time? Because he rustles up like looking like he's someone out of the Muppets, and he just comes in and he just always delivers in this test team. And then they've got Ashwin, who's we're obviously massive fans of Ashwin, and then even then they've got backups in kind of Jadeja, Akshar Patel, and those guys, and it's like, that is a pretty good bowling lineup, bowling unit for them to pick from. And even then they've got the likes of Ishant Sharma kind of backing them up as well. Like, how are teams going to get away from this? And I think it is their bowling lineup that is kind of trying to get them cemented as the next kind of dominators of Test cricket. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say we had a few questions about this from people on the Twitter as well. Mask is the one that I wrote down, who effectively asked about this. I think this India team are really led by the bowling lineup and the variety that they can bring, and the kind of X factor that two or three of them have. You know, it's Jasprit Bumrah, any conditions in the world, you don't really want to be facing him, do you? Ashwin, if there's any help for a spinner at all, or you're left-handed, you are in trouble when Ashwin's got the ball. And when there's no help and you're right-handed, he's not going to throw the game away. He ties the end right. And then the emergence of Siraj over the last 12 months has been something else. He's like mini Bumrah without the action. You know, he gets that. It's just so much intensity. He's like Kohli's perfect bowler in a way, isn't it? If Kohli had to imagine a bowler, I think Siraj would be the what came out of Kohli's imagination. I don't rate Shardul Thakur quite highly. We had a few questions about whether this India pace attack or the Australian pace attack was better, and I think because of Shardul Thakur, you probably go Australia, but it's close. Siraj and Bumrah stand up next to Hazelwood and Cummins pretty comfortably. I think they're very, very good bowlers.
Yeah, and I don't think that Shami always seems to.
Shami! We didn't even talk about Shami. He picked 5 wickets here, blew away South Africa. It seems to be perhaps the most skillful in terms of pure bowling talent and being able to deliver different game plans of the lot. He if you have to bowl a full length, he'll nail that from ball 1. If you have to bowl back for length, he'll nail that from ball 1. There must be a nightmare to face.
He's now got 200 Test wickets. Which is
it's just relentless. This was England's problem in the summer, wasn't it? It never stopped. You'd have 55 overs to bat out for a draw, and it would be 55 overs of hell. It would be 3 overs each of Bumrah and Shami to open up. Then Siraj gets the ball, and then
Jadeja comes on. And then, and then they let their guard down. They're just like, oh my God, we've just got through 40 overs of that. Lord Thakur comes on, just floats one outside off stump, and we get out.
Yeah, it's relentless. They're incredibly good. Ross, is there anything else you want to talk about, or do you want to quickly run through some Twitter questions? Because we did have a lot.
Yeah, let's go through some Twitter questions. I think I think we've done that.
From Mazakia, what's Shardul Thakur's role in this team? Played as an all-rounder, came to bat as a night watchman, bowled fewer overs than Ashwin on a pitch that's clearly not assisting spinners. I know he's the Lord, but sometimes Lords need clarity too, right? Ross, what do you think he's there for?
I think he is the filler. You know how he's the utility man. John O'Shea for Man United.
John O'Shea of India. I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Like he could play against the big player, gets across the back four, could play in midfield. I think he even went in goal once, John O'Shea. But that's kind of like Thakur's role in this side, is to fill in of what they need. Like, he's clearly a talented player. He might not be the most talented, but India have a hole in that department, right? They don't have too many options when it comes to pace bowlers who can bat.
Yeah,
and he at the moment is kind of top of the tree in that regard. It's not a huge. It's probably their area where they've got a bit of weakness.
It's a balance question, isn't it? No, Ishant Sharma's probably a better bowler than he's definitely a better bowler than Shardul Thakur. But you can't have 4 number 11s. Even while you'd have 3 number 11s and elite all-rounder Jasprit Bumrah to balance things out a little bit. We had Lorato. He's asked us 3 questions here, Ross. Well, we can answer them all. Is this India's greatest Test team, considering their results in Australia, England, and South Africa? Will South Africa beat England next year in the series in the English summer? And is Test cricket more important to certain countries, considering recent results? So, which one? Will you answer one? I'll answer one, and then you answer the last one.
I'll go with the South Africa versus England thing. I think that those two teams actually, in English conditions, will actually be a pretty good battle between each of them. I think England, in theory, like what we've seen, is bad. I think there will be some changes in the England side, but actually in those conditions, those batsmen and those bowlers are going to be pretty evenly matched, I think, and I reckon it should be. Is it a 2-match series? I think so. It's going to be actually pretty close. But again, you always have to favour the home team, regardless of how badly they're doing in Australia.
Yeah, I think that there's a few people that have asked questions about this, and we've touched upon it. So we're not going to go into loads of detail again and retread old ground. But South Africa do not have a rock solid batting lineup, and I think that's a recipe for being rolled once or twice by probably still James Anderson and Stuart Broad. And
yeah,
at home, England will get 250 regularly enough that actually will win the matches. 250 in England is an okay score. It's not a match-losing score, and they'll crank out a couple of those and probably win the series. I'd have thought.
Yeah. They don't have a standout, do they? They don't have a standout superstar either in that.
Quinton de Kock. And he's like people like Dean Elgar and Markram are really good batters, but it's you're asking a lot of those two, and you're asking Van der Dussen or Bavuma or both to take a big step up to have a very good team there. I think at the moment it's pretty iffy.
Yeah, you're pretty much asking them to go out and play their best game of Test cricket every single time, and sometimes it just doesn't happen, especially in England, where you will get a good nut every now and again.
Yeah, Lorato. So is this India's greatest Test team? I think it must be. Or over like the last 5 years, I can't. I know India had some great results in the past, but India are just like going around the world dominating people at the moment, aren't they? They basically never lose at home unless something freakish happens. They are extremely competitive everywhere they travel. They will see what let's say they beat England, didn't they? In the 4-match series, they beat England. They beat Australia comfortably. I know South Africa's like one of the final frontiers for Indian cricket. I don't think winning this series is the same as beating Graham Smith's side from a few years ago. In fact, pretty much any South African side since their readmission. I think South Africa are a bit of a low ebb. But yeah, India are. I think I can't see I can't see that you could argue that this isn't the greatest Indian team. Test team.
And you look at it. They've always had a strong batting lineup, like from Lakshman to Dravid, Tendulkar, etc. But now they just have that. You use that word balance of Thakur. Like they just have that balance And having people like being able to go, do you know what, we're going to play Jadeja and Ashwin, and then we're going to have the kind of almost the three of the top, say 7 or 8 fast bowlers in the world in your lineup. That is an amazing platform for then KL Rahul, Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli to kind of go from. It's a pretty formidable team.
They probably have right now their best ever fast bowler, probably their best ever spinner, probably their best ever all-rounder. Virat Kohli, probably not their best ever batter, but he's in the conversation.
He's in the top 2.
Yeah. And then Pujara, KL Rahul, Rohit Sharma,
Rahane.
All very capable backup men. None of them, you might not make it into the greatest top 5 in Indian history, but they're not. Again, they're making it. They'd be on the bench. They'd be bringing drinks out. So that, and then the last one is Test cricket more important to certain countries considering recent results. Yeah.
It is.
It
is.
I
mean, West Indies is probably the perfect example of that, right? West Indies are in a position where actually there's far more money to be made playing T20 cricket. And what's going to be more attractive, especially when you don't have, say, facilities or you don't have the time, etc. Why go through all the scrutiny of Test cricket and all the work that you have to do for that when actually you can turn up, hit 25 off 8 balls and kind of be like, oh, do you know what? I've had a great day.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Test cricket as well. So I think there are 2 things that sometimes I think the disarray teams that look like they are in is because they're really desperate to be good at Test cricket. They're trying new players, they're trying new game plans. They're, in Bangladesh's case, doctoring their pitch so badly that they can't travel anywhere else in the world and play even semi-competent cricket at the moment. And because they're trying so hard, it looks ugly. I mean, like England, they've got no idea who the best 11 are because they've tried to come up with a master plan to solve the sport and it's failed. And now they're reaping the consequences of it. They're not. I don't think they're failing because they don't care. I think they're failing because they're trying something that isn't working. And the other thing is in Test cricket, sometimes it looks like a side doesn't care or can't be bothered or whatever. But actually, they're just getting beaten really badly. Like, it's not Test cricket. If you are not the best team and you are not playing in favourable conditions, you are probably going to lose. And there's not weather. You are almost certainly going to lose. And sometimes those defeats can be really painful, and it looks like you don't care or you're just not interested. But actually, what's happening is that you're getting a doing over by people who are better than you. And the arena that Test cricket has built to display these skills makes the contrast really stark. It's a bit like tennis. Test cricket is closer in dynamic, I think, to tennis than it is to something like football. So in football, a good team can turn up and lose to a bad team because the bad team had some good tactics, or the bad team someone had a day out for the bad team. In tennis, the best tennis player normally wins. Like it's far more. There's far less randomness. Test cricket is closer to that than it is to football, where there's a lot more randomness. And CT20, if you want that version of cricket, that's where you see the second best team win a lot. I think some people in England, and I'm talking about people in England here, need to cool their jets a little bit on the death of Test cricket or nobody cares, this, that, and the other. It's hard, and sometimes you play a better team in favourable conditions and they beat you.
And those same people would have played like 50 over cricket, or they would have played 40 over cricket on a Saturday. Yeah. And they would have got pissed off and thrown their toys out the pram, thrown their hat on the floor, kind of let their mind wander. When you're getting pounded in a 40 over game, Test cricket lasts 5 days. You've got 5 days to kind of turn up and be like, oh, we're getting hammered every single day here. What is your face supposed to be? Are you supposed to be all smiles and be like, I'm having such a good time. I care so much about this. We're only 600 runs behind. And it's like, I just think sometimes, they need a bit of a reality check, and I think it's also fair. Like the visceral, emotional reaction to getting pounded by Australia is a massive thing for England fans, and I'm sure we were no different on the kind of some of the daily shows. But there is a bit where you do need to have a bit of a step back and be like, do you know what? is cyclical. People go through different cycles. People have different players, and sometimes you just got to be lucky with the group of players that come through at the same time. And at the moment, that's not for England.
Yeah, there's no transfer market. Otherwise, England could go into the transfer market and buy like.
How much would you have paid for Devon Conway? A lot.
A lot. They would pay. I reckon they would pay. A lot of money for Conway. They could bring in Conway. You'd probably bring in one of the backup South African fast bowlers. I reckon you could get, I don't know, Marco Jansen on the cheap.
We're definitely buying a spinner.
Yeah. Who's
Simon Harmer's coming in, isn't he? That's we would have picked him.
We'll take India's third best spinner. We'll buy Nadeem.
No, we're not going to take Shabazz Nadeem. We are not buying him at all.
Right, Ross, we're going to wrap up the show. One last question from Tilal. Do you see India winning this series 3-0 or South Africa coming back?
I think I reckon South Africa will put up a bit of a fight. But I also think the weather's going to come into it. I'll go 2-0 India.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. 2-0. I'd agree. Anyway, we're going to wrap up now. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Rate us, subscribe, like, comment. What else? Go to patreon.com/the cricket pod. Yeah.
And come back for next week, where we will be covering daily shows, obviously, for the next match of the Ashes. And we've got a new sponsor for that as well.
Oh, we do, yeah. Bye-bye.